To turn our attention back to the rugby, delighted to say we're joined on the line again by former Ireland international Anna Caplice. Morning, Anna.
Well, lads, how are you?
How are you getting on?
Good now. More sport this morning, is it?
There's a fair bit of sport, yeah. That's the common theme on this. Sometimes we squeeze in some other stuff, but generally there's a lot going
on. I'm thinking of changing sport. I think I'll become a snooker fan.
Go for that.
Well, I mean, Shane's recommendation there, Anna, that you can have a doze off in the middle of it was definitely appealing to me. That was.
I know. I was just listening to it there, like, especially all the drama and women's rugby. I think I need something a bit more calming.
Well, you've segued beautifully into the first thing that we need to ask you about. We will come to talk about the game because there's plenty to get into, and we will do that Ireland-Italy, of course. But first of all, the Telegraph article. We'd spoken to you a couple of weeks ago, and you touched on the reasons behind your own decisions to walk away, and it felt like actually looking at some of the stuff that had come through in the article was reminded me of what you were talking about. And obviously we had the Ireland head coach Greg McWilliams out in the meantime to reflect on that. We'd Fiona Hayes on the Six Nations show yesterday, Anna, and she was saying that she was only surprised by the fact that people were surprised by the stuff that came out, that it wasn't necessarily new news.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was reading it like pretending to be shocked kind of a thing, because none of it's new to me, none of it's new to anyone who's been involved in women's rugby for quite some time will have experienced things like this kind of an alarming amount of sexism. And then I read through it and I was like, it's kind of there's definitely more to it. And I always say, like, the story of Irish women's rugby is like a big, massive jigsaw, and everyone has a piece that they could contribute to it. And, every player will have their own story. And sadly, a lot of it is stories of like frustration and disappointment. And so, this Telegraph article wasn't news to me. And I think I agree with Fihayes. They're saying like she was surprised that people were surprised. I think people are surprised less and less, to be honest. And I think the overwhelming response, it's in a way it's nice to see. Is there some kind of comfort to be taken in the fact that people are like, we've had enough of this? Like often before, and certainly in the past few years, if something like this would come out, it's, people kind of get back to it saying like, the women giving out again. Those responses are becoming less and less because people are like, what's something else? What, we need to sort this out. We need to support the girls, and I feel like there's so much support for the girls now, and people really understand that the girls and these results are not reflective of the squad and the ability of the squad. It's their support that comes in. I think that's kind of becoming very clear to like fans of the game and followers of rugby in general and sport in general in Ireland now, because we want this team to succeed. Yet here we are again talking about more sexism and like, the shorts and the contracts and all that. Like, when can we actually talk about the rugby? We have to just I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about this. We have to talk about this. When are we going to get to a stage when we can talk about this less and less and talk about the actual performances more and more, where we are in contention to win a Six Nations?
Yeah, it is a very good point, and as you say, we have to talk about it, and you're I know you're not suggesting we don't talk about it, because it's important that when it comes up now, and the fact that it's come up as an international story as well, I think is important. And almost that point, and it feels like we need to be hearing from players like yourself who've been recently in the system, or players who are currently in the system, like at the minute we have an absence of people who fit that profile, who are coming out to say everything here is brilliant, we've learned all the lessons from the past, and this has been fixed, and this has been fixed, and the communication is good. It feels like we're missing that piece at the minute.
I've been trying to think of, I agree with you, and I've been trying to think of an analogy to kind of explain this really in non-rugby terms, or see how else this could be related to how these processes happen in life. So, for example, like I used to be a teacher in England, and all the schools get graded from outstanding is your top level, good requires improvement, and failing or whatever. And if you are a failing school, and you make an overhaul and you appoint new staff and you bring in, they're not going to say, like, they don't just say, okay, great, we've made these changes now, off you go. No, you get a review every month. Everything is reviewed. There's like an overhaul of, staff, systems, everything. So like recently, with the appointment of like new staff, we can't just be like, right, we'll leave you off now. We trust you to do it all. No, this is a requires improvement / failing situation. We're not going to just sit back and be like, okay, that's fine. If we're losing, it's fine because we trust what's going on. Maybe they are doing the right thing and we don't see it yet. I'm skeptical, and I've said that before. I'm skeptical and I'm cynical because of what I've been through as a player. So I'm just not going to sit here and be like, okay, we'll take your word for it. When someone turns around and says, no, everything's fine, I can't take your word from it. And you're right, there are players like me who've come out recently and that are standing up, because we know that current players can't. I know that from myself. Like, I could never say what I really wanted to. I'm trying to do that now as best I can, while still, keeping like my friends, like the players who are still in the squad and the girls that I don't know, keeping them in my thoughts all the time by the things that I say and how I go about how I say things. And everyone is like that. The thing here is, we all want the same thing. We all want Irish women's rugby to start performing. And I think the IRFU has done a good job in making it seem like we're against each other somehow. The former players against the current players, against the management, against the 7s, against the 15s, or whatever. I don't know. I just think that we all have to remember that we all want the same thing here, and that is to improve and compete and like get to the same level of rugby that our men's team is at and our under 20s team is at, and like have fair chances at really performing and competing.
Obviously the IRFU came out in response to Fiona Thomas's article to say, well, we've put these structures in place, and that's fair enough, obviously, like you say, in terms of a union or an association or any governing body where it's been identified that there's stuff that needs to be improved, and I think demonstrably there is stuff that's been improved, and there's obviously more work to be done in that regard, and they will defend themselves in relation to that. Greg McWilliams obviously was out to put forward to do that yesterday as well. Can you just talk to us, Anna, about your own experience, if you can, just in relation to the stuff that you read in relation to, you mentioned about the shorts. Obviously, you spoke to us before about the communication of team selections. What can you tell us about your own experience of the pieces that you read in that article?
I think that squad selection kind of issue, that affected me a lot as a player. I was in the receiving end of that. Lots of girls were, in terms of being forgotten to be told that you were dropped, or forgotten to be, told in advance of a meeting, and suddenly you look at the screen and your name's not there. That's hard to talk about, because that's the management themselves. How they managed that was they managed it badly, depending on what coaches were involved at the time. There was always mistakes around this. But I think that... Can
I ask you, Anna, sorry to interrupt, can I just ask you on that, because some of what's been said here from Greg McWilliams was that why is this article coming out now? This is historic stuff. Can you give us a timeline on what you're talking about?
I mean... And I can only speak of my experiences, even though whoever was interviewed for this has a similar story, but I'll only speak for myself.
Yeah.
I left the squad it was the previous management. So, oh my God, I can't keep track of the years now.
2019, was it?
2022 is when I was dropped from the squad for the last time, and then I decided to take myself out of to retire. But that that's only a couple of months before that, or a year before that. If he's saying it's historic, I don't agree with that statement.
And do you have a sense from what you're hearing or what you've experienced of whether things have improved since then?
I'm obviously not in the squad, so from the outside looking in, I feel like no. And that to say that it's historic, I don't think, like, what does historic mean? When does that come into effect? Like, if you still have players that are suffering from those, the trauma of something like that happening before, that's not historic, that's still current. You still have to deal with that within the current members of the squad, if there are current members of the squad who still, have a fear that could happen, or it's happened to them before. Like, even though it might not have been you as a coach, you still have to value that in your players' experience. And I think the reason that these errors keep happening is from the top down. There's no fear for them that they're going to be reprimanded for making an error like this, or that there's like a worry. It was just, pure casual, like, oh, sorry about that, when actually your whole world has fallen apart in a moment, and they're like, whoops, on their behalf, because there's no real consequence for them to have, to have just missed you off a list, or forgot to text, or forgot to call. Like, that's massive, the difference in experience for them, which is like, whoops, versus, oh my God, everything I've worked for here hasn't worked out for me. Like, that, the difference in that is massive, and it's a recurring trend. Whether it's happening in the current squad, from the article tells us that it is. So, I don't know what else to add.
And it's even the lack of something small, like the lack of protein supplements available to players for the Tour of Japan last summer, and even the derogatory comment about the alleged derogatory comment about women's rugby at the President's dinner as well. Like, did the likes of that comment surprise you, Anna?
Absolutely not. I'm here laughing because I've heard that comment a million times. Like, I hear it all the time. I still hear it from, people in rugby, supporters, fans. I have people writing to me privately to tell me that no one gives an F about women's rugby. You see it, you can see it, you can read it. Like, and these might be fans, but people in positions of power, that that also doesn't surprise me. I know, like, someone I know that she was telling me about a committee meeting she had attended, and this also isn't new. And if you're a club that doesn't behave this way, I'm not referring to you, but if you're a club that behaves this way, I am referring to you. There are, like, the contents of the meeting. So they'll go through, like, starting with senior men, senior seconds, senior thirds, under 20s, under 18s, under 15s, under 13s, under 10s, minis. Right, is that everything covered? And, the women have to say, excuse me, what about the women? Referring to everything after you've talked about the minis section. That's not strange. And if you're a club who's changed that and you go from men's senior team to women's senior team to under 20s, good, well done. Like, or even starting with the women's agenda, like, depending on, like, what stage of the season you're at or whatever. But that's not unusual to have the women's matters dealt with as people are getting up out of their chairs in a club. And these are the people who go on to, work in, get senior roles in the provinces and the union or whatever. That's not unusual.
I don't want you to feel badgered by these questions, and we will move on to talk about rugby in a minute, but I do think that it was important that we chat about it. When you said there's people writing to you, Anna, what do you mean?
Just I don't even know, like, I'd like to say that they're trolls, but some of them I can see, like, what club they're connected to, or their fans, or their players, or whatever, and they'll, write to me saying, like, it only happened recently. I had a really bad week there recently because I put out something. It was in response to the Tiger Woods thing, and I sent a tweet, and the amount of abuse that I got from rugby fans, and I can see that they're rugby fans, and they'll say in their profile, follower of whatever province, whatever club, and they'll be associated. So I can see that these people exist within clubs that have no time to listen to, like, women's players or athletes or whatever, and women's sport and whatever for them is just, like, not just irrelevant, an actual problem for them to go out of their way and write to me And I took it down off my Twitter in the end because I'd had such a bad week of receiving stuff like this. And then people went and found me on my other social media platforms and wrote to me, even though I hadn't like put anything there. So, you know, it's easy to find someone in rugby, like someone like me, who a former player who's, you know, active on social media. It's easy to find me and write to me and tell me what you really think. So, yeah, that's what I was referring to there.
Okay. It's a level of bonkers, I think, that is, and I also think that there's an element of, we tend to talk about this stuff of it being faceless social media, and certainly some of the stuff that we've seen here over the last few weeks in relation to various bits. The facelessness of it is the fact that it is actual. You can easily identify who people are is the thing that's starting to that I definitely caught me a bit by surprise and was unusual. The one, just to leave it on this and move on to talk about the game, but the thing that sort of struck me about it is that, like, it's hard for people to hear stuff that's not good, that doesn't reflect well on them, right? Like, that's just a human trait. Somebody says this thing you need to work on, your initial reaction can be defensive. So whether you're an individual or an organisation, that can be the case. And that was the one area of disappointment that I had over the last 48 hours, that there wasn't an element of officialdom in Irish rugby saying, okay, we thought we were sort of a little bit down the line, it's kind of clear that we're not, and there's a bit more work to be done. Will you just Can we take that away? Can we think about it? Can we come back with some sort of a thought through response? That just bit seemed to be lacking. I
completely agree. And I'm just wondering, who is it going to take? Who is going to be the person to say that, yes, you're right? And I have to comment on the comments from Greg, like, you know, for him to say, no, this isn't a sexist organisation. Why can't you just, you know, not just you as in terms of Greg, why can't someone just say, yes, we're dealing with this, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we can eradicate this title and this behaviours, and you know, to flat out just stand up and say, no, I don't think so. I was really annoyed at that. And you know, stand up for your girls, stand up for the players. Who's going to stand up for the players? Who's going to say, yes, we understand this, we're doing everything we can to change this, instead of saying, no, it doesn't exist? Stand up for the girls. Like, please, someone, who's it going to be to say, yes, we recognise this? Because every time that there's been someone to stand up and put out a story like this or an article, you're absolutely right, they've acted in a defensive way and said, no, this isn't the case. Even in that article, it was like, oh, we can't comment on this because we don't know who the player is. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who it is or isn't. Like, let's say, okay, an error, we made an error, we acknowledge it, we recognise it, we want to move on. But up till now, like, and there's a few other things in that article that really struck me, like, you know, that Greg and David Nusafora sat down to make a plan, and that they're on track with the plan. How could you be on track with the plan? Was the plan to come last in the Six Nations? Because that's what we're on track for now. Is that the plan? Was that really the plan? And these are the comments that make me feel like we're undervalued. You know, there were so many things, like, you know, the historic. It's not historic. It's not nearly irrelevant. We're not on track. Like, these are all, like, if we could just see, you know, stop the defensive attitude and say, no, this is all perfect. It's not perfect. Please acknowledge that. And please, like, let's say that this is where we're at. We're doing everything. Because I know there are some brilliant people in the IRFU. And if this is how difficult it seems from the outside, I can imagine it's very difficult for people on the inside to also achieve things. But let's recognise it and move on together. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing here. We're not on different teams. We're all on the same team. We all want the same thing. Let's work together. Stop pitting us against each other. It's not, you know, like I already said, you know, the groups against each other. That's not what this is. We need to move forward together.
I presume if one of those people in the IRFU is to pick up the phone later on today, over the next couple of weeks, and say, Anna, you've been through this over the last while, you've been vocal about it, can we grab a coffee and chat through your experiences of it? That's something you're open to?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. That's why, that's what I promised myself when I retired, that I would contribute to this journey as best I could. But no one in the IRFU ever spoke to me again after Greg McWilliams called me the day to tell me I wasn't going to be in the squad. No one ever spoke to me ever again. So I don't foresee it.
I'd say away from the constraints of live broadcast, that would be probably a smart thing for the IRFU to do. We'll see how that plays out over the next while. Thanks for giving, Anna. I know it's a hard one for you to get into, so appreciate it. Let's talk about the rugby. Obviously a couple of heavy defeats, a pivotal game now against Italy, England and Scotland come after that. What is there without going back into the conversation we've just had in terms of the playing side of it, is there like is there a different target for this group now, Anna? Has the success measures changed for them given what's happened over the first couple of games?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's funny, you know, and after the result of the French game, and there was a lot of kind of negative critique and everything, which was, you know, warranted with the scoreline against a 14-woman French side. So for me, watching that, I took away loads of positives. I was like, that was great. This moment was great. That moment was great. So I can imagine, like, within the squad, they are feeling like, look at that moment, look at what we achieved there, and let's build on those moments, because there were some brilliant, like some set piece, massive wins, like stealing the lineouts and scrum wins and stuff, like against France. And I think that they'll feel that if they can continue with those like moments, like, you know, small wins to transfer them into like bigger wins, they'll be happy. So I think, yeah, they know where they're at now. I think the kind of interesting thing about this is that I think Italy are scared of Ireland. And I think that Italy is like another world of rugby that will have very little idea of the media coverage that Ireland has been getting. They'll obviously see the scorelines and they'll have done their homework on Ireland, but in terms of all this extra conversation around Ireland that the Welsh women and the English girls and the Scottish girls are very aware of, Italy isn't aware of that. They don't know about all these extra stories. They don't kind of seem to be, you know, in a separate little rugby world over there, and that's fine for them. But I do think they have a fear. I think they have a fear of Ireland. So I think for Ireland coming into this game, this will be key, like a key performance and a place to pick up points.
The two sort of pivotal areas, watching our own Six Nations show yesterday, seem to be identified as our own unstructured attack, which might be a function of being constantly on the back foot, of course, and then Italy, the ferociousness at which they went at the breakdown against France. Mm-hmm. Two areas that potentially decide the outcome of this. Absolutely.
And I think that, well, Italy are they're similar to their men's team. They're kind of put together like a couple of like amazing phases and just can't seem to finish things off. Now they've picked up some great experience at the World Cup, and they had some real standout players. So that will obviously like start to change. They had a very tough 2 opening rounds, you know, so we'll be very battle hardened from England and France. And their physicality will be massive. But, you know, Ireland have just played France as well. So it'll be a similar level they'll meet at in the middle at the breakdown. And, you know, if Ireland can kind of sort out their nomination in defence and communication defence to like nail those like missed tackles, that'll be huge for them. Like, and no doubt that they'll have worked on that. Like any player who missed a tackle the last day is going to be like, I ain't missing a tackle on Saturday here in Parma. Like so if that small detail can be rectified, then that will change the flow of things.
And are we going to finally get a W on the board?
I always want to say yes, because when you're a player, and which is only, you know, recently for me, you believe that you will. And, you know, the last time in Parma for the Irish team, they're not good memories, but we did beat Italy. And when you're going into this match with all you've learned from the first 2 games and the whole world on fire outside of your squad, all you're talking about is how do we get the win here, because absolutely they believe they can. So yeah, I'm going to back them, and I'm going to say that yeah, we can.
Okay. Good. Well, there's plenty in our chat over the last 20 minutes, and as I said a little bit earlier, we appreciate you being open and honest about that stuff. It's, I think, important for now that we have those conversations, and as you say, let's hope again that in 6 months or whatever length of time it takes, that we're in a position where we can just talk about the rugby. We'd be delighted to do that. But for the minute, Anna, thanks a million.
Thanks, lads.
Anna Caplice on the line there, looking ahead to the weekend's rugby and reacting as well to what has gone on with Irish rugby during the week.